Hi, everyone. I am your host, Mike Hingson, and welcome to another edition of Unstoppable Mindset. Ooh, I'm talking so well today. Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we are going transcontinental again. We're going to be chatting with Flor Pedrola. That's my English pronunciation of Pedrola. And Flor is in Madrid, Spain. I have been to Madrid, but it's been a long time. Anyway, she has an interesting story to tell. I was reading her biography, and she starts out her biography by saying something to the effect of, I was a recent economist ready to carve out a career when suddenly in 1989, fate plunged me into worlds totally unknown to me. Wow. What a way to attract someone's attention, mine specifically, and yours now too. And I am sure that Flor is going to tell us all about that. But first, hi, Flor. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you very much, Michael. I am thrilled to be with you. And thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. I really believe that the work that you are doing is fantastic. And I am accepting this with joy. And really, I'm super happy. I just would like to say that even though my English seems to be fluent, sometimes I make some mistakes. So I hope that you will excuse me.
Well, we all make mistakes sometimes. We sometimes let our tongues get ahead of our words and our brain. So I wouldn't worry about it a bit. You're doing fine. Well, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit, if you would, about the early Flor, growing up and so on, if you would, where you grew up and a little bit about you as a child. That's always kind of fun to start the process.
All right, let's go. So my name is Flor Pedrola. I was born in Madrid, in Spain. My father was Spanish and my mother is French. I was raised always in the two cultures. And I remember when I was a child asking my mother, but Mom, what is better, being French or being Spanish? And she always answered saying, everything is okay. It's just about being different. But you are lucky enough to have two cultures. And this is going to be fantastic for you. So I am the oldest of three daughters. The two that follow me are Paloma and Elena. And we have been living in Madrid all our lives.
Yeah, you stay in one spot, huh?
Yes. And that was not my initial thought. I wanted to go to France and study education. But unfortunately, as I was making some money doing babysitting, I had to travel to Malaga, which is in the south of Spain.
Mm-hmm.
We went by car and we had an accident in the car with the car, and one of the children died.
Oh.
So that made me so sad, and it really destroyed all the plans that I had. I didn't know what to do. So as I was studying at the French school, kind of economics, the beginning of economics, she proposed me to continue and make the career of economics in Madrid, which I did. This is why I am an economist, not just because I wanted to do it, but because it was like, okay, this could be a nice solution. And I became an economist. Then I started to work. I started to work in an American company. And I got married, and yes, life made me some surprises.
How so? What kind of surprises?
As I was mentioning in my biography, I had to be confronted to a world that I was completely unfamiliar with, and this is the world of brain health.
Now, why did that happen?
So the first time I had to know about brain health was in 88, when my father was diagnosed with ALS. This is amyotrophic lateral disease, and this is a motor neuron disease.
Right.
I remember attending few congresses about this illness, and I remember doctors saying that there was hope and that some helpful treatments would be discovered in a 5 years time period, I remember. But my father died 18 months after being correctly diagnosed. So I was wondering, what the hell is this brain disease, and why is this happening, and what is a motor neuron disease, right? So I was kind of surprised because it was so unknown for me. I decided with my mom and my sister to create an association that is called Adela. But we did not continue with it after some years because it was too much suffering. It had been such a painful period that we decided just to put the basis, and then let others to continue with it.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1995, my second child was born. And in 1998, he was diagnosed by a neurologist as an ADHD child. So for the ones that are not familiar with ADHD, it corresponds to attention deficit and hyperactive disorder. And I remember when we went to visit the doctor, he said that was a very clear diagnosis, even though my son was only 3 years old. And while we were leaving the office, he told us, be prepared. And I thought, what? Again, we come back to brain matters, right? I am not a doctor. I am not a nurse. We did not have any family related to this career, and I had no clue what he was talking about. So my son was at the nursery when he was diagnosed, and then he entered school, and then problems arrived. Very annoying problems where he was suffering a lot. He had behavioral issues, difficult relationships with his friends, and very bad results. The teacher, when he was 6, the teacher told us, your boy is really suffering. Maybe you should investigate a little bit more about what you could do with him. And I had no clue. I really did not have no clue. We did not want to give him any medicine for him to stay quiet in the class, because that was one of the main concerns of the teacher, But at the end, we had to give him some Ritalin so he could concentrate while he was studying. But the side effects were really annoying. He could not sleep, and he was really losing weight. So it has been a tough period, but I really did not know how to help him. But what happened, and God always put the right people at the right place in the right moment. So I was contacted by a person who was living in Australia, because my job at the company was about leadership. I am an executive coach. So I was relating to executive coaching and facilitation, training, mentoring, meaning taking care of the people. So she contacted me because of my leadership competencies. And we decided to explore and see how we could collaborate. She even came to Madrid. She was living in Australia, in Sydney. And I was part at that time of different groups. I was mentoring executive women, and I was part of a book jury also. So I invited her to make her presentation about a very interesting program that was about neuro leadership. And I said, well, this is very helpful for the leaders and for my actual job, but maybe this could also help my son. So I asked her, what else can I do to learn about this? And she said, why don't you come to Australia? Because we are organizing some courses there. And maybe if you meet some different people, maybe they can give you some light. So I ended up in Australia. Sometimes I think, why? What the hell? How come I did that? Because that was absolutely not part of my plan. But I went to Australia. I attended her neuro leadership training. And that was the moment where I met people absolutely extraordinary. And one of them was commenting about Dr. Daniel Amen, who is living in the US. And he's a psychiatrist and a radiology expert. And he uses SPECT scans to help deliver accurate diagnosis to his patients and to find the best customized treatments. So I started to be very interested in all the work that he was doing. And he also created some, let's say, brain health learning for people that were not in the medical sector, right? So I decided to study with him. And this is how I became a brain health coach and a licensed trainer for not only help my people at the company, but also my son. So 10 years later, here I am, coaching people with a neuroscience-based approach. And I have now my own program, but maybe we will be talking about this later. This is not the point now.
So you left being an economist and working in the economic field to become a brain health coach.
Yeah.
And that's what you do full time.
Not exactly full time, because I'm still working in the company. And now that many things are changing, now I am doing more customer support task, even though I still coach some people. But yes, I am developing more and more in my private side, everything that is related to coaching and helping people to thrive by being aware about the importance of the brain and taking control of their lives by improving few habits that can help them to be much more happy.
So you said you still work for a company. Is that company in economics, or what company do you work for?
It's a technology company.
It's a technology company. And what do you do for them?
I have been working with them since 1986. So I have been doing so many things. I was a system engineer. I was in sales. I was in market development. And then I moved to kind of HR. And this is where since 2008, after taking a manager role, I decided to devote only to helping people thrive within their careers, because I really have a servant leadership mindset. And this is what I love. This is what I enjoy. And it is fantastic to help others.
So you are working some in the technology field, but you're also now doing a lot more in your own private industry, if you will, dealing with brain health.
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate that. So what do you do these days in terms of brain health? So what do you do on your side job, if you will?
So first of all, I used all the information that I got from Dr. Amen to help my son. Because one of the things that I discovered is that there is no one single type of ADHD, which in Spain 30 years ago, it seemed that nobody knew, right?
Yeah.
And it is so important to know that there are 7 different types of ADHD. And this means that the treatment has to be also different. And for me, that was an eye-opening. The other main lesson that I got from Dr. Amen is that there is no mental health as such. Mental health does not exist, if you allow me to say. Behaviors, thoughts, emotions are so much related with the structure of the brain that it is, at least for me, much more interesting to see how the brain functions and then to discover how this applies to the way we live, right? So based on those 2 things, what I do now is to offer coaching programs. I have 2 different programs. One is for young people from 20 to 30 years old when they are finishing their studies at the university and starting their first job. So I can help them to get to know themselves better under a brain perspective, to observe themselves and to discover what are their big, let's say, capacities or strengths, always based on brain assessments that I used to. And then I have another program for adults. This is a program that is already packed. 5 sessions where first we talk about values, purpose, and objectives, and then we do some brain assessments, and then I do the proper coaching. But once we know what is the identity of the person.
So you're talking about the people you work with are people who have ADHD?
Not specifically. There are so many weaknesses, as we could say, under a corporate wording. People with anxiety, with depression, some people that consider that they are not able to perform the way they wish. And what we see together is what is going on their brains, if there is something that is missing. And we try to develop some new habits that can help them. So I wanted to mention also that the approach that I take is an anthropological perspective, because every human being is made out of 4 dimensions. The first one is the biological, let's say the one that we can measure in some way, and it is related to brain health, physical health, the nutrition, the exercise, sleep, any type of infections that they may have, allergies, injuries, toxins. So sometimes people are not aware of bad habits that they are having, and that is preventing their prefrontal cortex to work optimally. Then we have the psychological dimension, which is related to the self-talk or the self-concept that they have about themselves. It's about discovering if they have past emotional trauma, and it is also related to the sense of worth or the sense of power and control that they might think they have. Mm-hmm. Then we have the social dimension, which is related to the quality of their environment. It is so important to be surrounded by the appropriate people, the friends, the ones that will be cheering you up when you want to continue in your journey. It's about stress. It's about how they live their work, or even what happened at school, because sometimes people, they still remember some traumatic experiences in school. And finally, it's the spiritual dimension, which is related to the sense of meaning and purpose, and responding to the question why my life does matter, right? So this is very important because, for example, for any people that has some brain disorder like ADHD, it could be very difficult to make the brain to develop as it should at the path that the school is requiring, right? Because in fact, ADHD is characterized by some brain areas that are less developed than the average, let's say. So those brain areas, they will be developed in the future, but in the school period, it is difficult for the children to follow the instructions as they are requested. So maybe when you are 12 years old, your brain is 8 years old. And when you are 16, you are 14. So it really needs some time to develop, because for whatever reason, those neurons or those connections were not created as they should be. So from a four dimensions perspective, you see that your child cannot follow the rhythm that is requested, but you can help him so much with the other dimensions. Because you can, for example, develop their curiosity. My son is passionate about art, and he used to go by himself when he was very young to the museums. He loved to go to museums. He loved to see things and to make connections of colors, of structures, of movements, of textures. He developed a lot of information that was stored in his brain, even though it was not used, let's say, but this information was stored, and it has been used later. He can refer to all the things that he was learning. And also regarding the sense of purpose, it's very difficult to talk about the sense of purpose with young children, but sometimes you can teach them about values, about, for example, for me, it's very important to be grateful. Yes, it is key to understand that maybe something in one of your dimensions is not working as it should, and let me put that in brackets, but you can help the person from other dimensions. And this is so relieving for them.
Yeah. So you said a number of interesting things here. One thing that I had never known before is that there are 7 different kinds of ADHD.
Yes.
Did Dr. Amen discover that, or did other people discover that? Do you know anything about how that happened, how that was learned, and what they are?
Well, Dr. Amen uses SPECT scans. This is a very specific type of scan that are used for the brain. And what these scans measure is the blood flow, meaning he sees in real time if the blood flow is enough or if it is too low or too high. So let me explain. The importance of the blood flow is that this is what transports the nutrients for the neurons, right? The glucose and the oxygen. Excuse me. So what happens is that if there is not enough blood flow, the neurons are not receiving what they need for work, and they do not function. And each area of the brain has its own, let's say, task to perform. So what he has been able to see is what are the different areas of the brain that can be affected by an ADHD child. And for many other symptoms. It's not only about ADHD. He's a psychiatrist and he sees a lot of conditions. It's just that I am much more focusing on this because this is what matters to me. But what he sees, and after doing more than 200,000 SPET scans, he has a lot of studies where he can share what he has discovered. And he insists so much on differentiating the type of disorder because each of them requires a different treatment.
Yeah. And so because he has done physical scans, and I think that's the interesting part about it, is that he has taken the approach of truly looking physically at the brain and doing the spectral scans that have been used to make his determination. So that's certainly, I would think, a major advance. So like in the case of your son, I assume he scanned your son's brain.
No, we could not do it, but
okay.
As we had so many studies published by Dr. Amen, I was able to study, and I am part of the team of brain health coaches. So we share a lot of information, and anytime that I need something, I just look for it. But yes, I would like to just take what you just mentioned. One of the sentences Dr. Amen used to say is that when he discovered the possibility of using technology and doing these SPECT scans, he said, a traumatologist can see if the bone is broken.
Right.
And a cardiologist can see what is happening to the heart. But psychiatrists, we never knew what was happening in the brain. And now we can.
Yeah. So, and that's why I mentioned that it was a physical situation, because he's doing something that most people haven't done. But the other question that comes up is, so he does a scan, or let's talk about your son. What then is done as a result of the scan to address the issue?
Well, what he does is to make some tests and interviews, and the scan is like giving light to the situation.
Okay, so but you discover what kind of ADHD someone has. Let's say your son. That's fine. But then obviously what you want to do is to mitigate or eliminate it. And how do you do that?
Well, basically, the time I knew about Dr. Amen, I started to change his nutrition, for example, because sugar is very, very bad for ADHD children. I mean, it's bad for the population, but for the ADHD children is really horrible. So it's about lowering excitement, and it's about taking some other type of, it's not medicine, but supplements. And those supplements, you can find them anywhere, So for example, he's taking L-theanine and GABA and vitamin B6. And also, in the case of my son, sports were super important. So what he did, and he managed to succeed in his university degree, was that he was waking up very early. He used to go to swim 1 hour at the university, and then he was attending class, and he didn't need any specific medication for that. And by the time he had exams, he used to take one pill of Ritalin, and then he stopped taking it. So he has been using it for the very specific moment that he knew he needed some concentration and being quiet. But since quite a few years, he's not taking any medicine, just sports, good nutrition, sleep, and of course, purpose, self-talk, and good friends. You have to take care of the 4 dimensions, not just the biological one.
Well, the other question, though, is, given what Dr. Amen has done in terms of being able to diagnose ADHD and brain health through physical analyses, are there other kinds of physical treatments that can be incorporated, or have we not progressed to the point of being able to do this yet? Are there physical kinds of things that can be done to, using your description, improve blood flow and so on to those appropriate parts of the brain? Or are we still not really in a position to be able to do that kind of thing?
Well, the main tool to increase blood flow is exercise,
But there's not a physical kind of thing. We don't know why blood flow to a particular part of the brain necessarily is not what it should be. We haven't analyzed, or we haven't figured that part out yet, or what?
Oh, yes, there are many things that can disturb, let's say, brain flow, blood flow, excuse me, smoking, alcohol.
Right. Well, we're talking about like your son and people who just are diagnosed even at an early age with ADHD. There have to be reasons that the blood isn't flowing appropriately to the brain, physically speaking, right? And so
neurotransmitters, many things. Each case is different.
And we don't yet know how to physically reverse that in the brain.
Well, you are asking me something that maybe it is too medical for me, I do not go, but I can tell you that before the child is born, there are some internal processes within the brain that might condition the fact that the structure of the brain is not as it should be.
Right.
And this is going to impact this is one of the main reasons why there are brain disorders.
And my point is, though, we don't yet have the technology or the tools or maybe the knowledge to reverse those processes or those physical situations. I mean, yeah, there are things that we can do like with drugs and so on, as you talked about, but we don't physically know yet how to really go in after birth or whatever and reverse those situations. Is that what I'm hearing?
I cannot tell you because this is not my.
Okay.
I am not a medical specialist,
But
I know that AI is doing incredible things. For example, creating algorithms that are trying to detect some illnesses in the brain of a child before he's born and try to correct that. But I have not heard anything about blood flow, but more about other things. Yes.
And so the point is that that this is still a relatively new area, and Dr. Amen is clearly a pioneer, if you will, in that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's fascinating to hear that he took the leap to say, why don't we understand the brain physically like we understand other parts of the body? And so he developed the whole scan process to begin that process and go down that road, which I think is exciting.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that even though my clients, they don't have the possibility to do the scans because we are in Spain or because there is no possibility for them to travel around the world. One of the things through the brain assessments that I offer to them, one of the things that they say is, wow, now I see how my brain functions and I can understand my behaviors. And I know that the way I behave is not my fault. This is so important, because sometimes we behave in a way that we do not understand, that we do not know why this is happening. And this is because there is a physical interference somewhere in your brain. And once you identify it and you see that there is this structure, physical structure that is not working, the correspondent behavior is also derailing, right? I think, first of all, my family, for example, when my son was behaving the way he was doing, they used to tell me, "Oh, you're not raising your child appropriately." And I was saying, "Oh my God, what can I do?"
Yeah.
But the fact is that this is because they did not see what was happening in the brain. For example, if you see a child with a cast in his leg, you cannot ask him to run, right? Because you know that he cannot do it. But when there is a brain disorder happening, even though you ask the child to perform some task and he does not do it, then you will put an etiquette instead of thinking that he's not doing it because he cannot do it. So that was such an eye-opening. And I think that Dr. Amen has helped so many people,
Yeah.
not only the ones that were affected, but also the environment that has to become much more empathetic, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear about the advances. Let me ask you this. Brain health clearly is very important. And with the work of people like Dr. Amen, it's gone to a whole new level.
Mm-hmm.
How do you believe that brain health, um, how do you believe that brain health and disability or relates to disability in the workplace?
Okay, so
And disability, whether it's mental or physical
yes,
or dumb people
yes,
is another story, but that we won't worry about that today. But
yes. So I would say from a physical perspective, in the workplace, I think companies now are more and more prepared to assist their employees and to help them to perform the best they can, because one thing that is clear, at least from my point of view, is that diversity, excuse me, diversity is only positive. So I remember people that were blind that used to have first their dog with them at the office and using a specific keyboard to work. And this is going to evolve. And I think that at some point, I hope this will become transparent. It should not be something to discuss. People with, I don't know, we had also some paralytic people and trisomic people, and no problem. It can happen, and those people are clever and they can bring a lot of things. And mainly, I would say they are much more resilient than the people that did not have to fight so hard to find their place in the work environment. From the psychological perspective or the mental perspective, disabilities can come either because you are, for example, ADHD, but ADHD when you are a child can be a big problem. But when you are an adult, and if you have been working on it, one of the main characteristics of an ADHD person is that they are super creative. Their imagination is always running all over the places. And again, they can bring so much different perspective in the work environment. And then you can be like, I don't know, Asperger, But Asperger, we had so many famous people, Anthony Hopkins is Asperger. I saw it some weeks ago. I don't know, Michael Phelps, he was ADHD and he was a champion with a lot of gold medal, So yes, it is a difference. And this was so helpful because I come back to what my mom says, it's not that French is better than being Spanish or Spanish being better than being French. It's just different. And let's work together.
Yeah. And I think that it, like anything else that we deal with, is appropriate to discuss and understand, although from an employer and employee relationship, what people should not do is look down on people who are different than they are. And we see that all too often, which is extremely unfortunate. But I think it's important that people really do develop a good understanding of different people. And as you said, diversity and accommodating difference is a very positive thing. We should do that. We should accept that not everyone is exactly the same. And
we
so
are not. Everybody is unique.
Everybody is unique. And so it's important that we deal with that and that we recognize that. But so many people don't. And they regard people who are different than they are as less than they are. And that's too bad. And I know that as the world has progressed, as knowledge has progressed, we now hear a whole lot more about ADHD than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I'm sure that Dr. Amond has contributed to that. And people like you are contributing to that because you help coach people. Tell me a little bit more about your coaching business and what you do. So when people come to you, who comes to you, and then what do you do?
So in the adult area,
let's stick with that.
Yeah, mainly my clients are people that are very much stressed. I mean, this is the word they use. Okay, they say that I am very stressed. I am losing control of my life. Maybe I see that I am not enjoying what I am doing. I have too much anxiety. I cannot sleep properly. And it's like they lost their way, in different aspects. So what I do is my first session, we talk about what are the values that they really that attract them, not the ones that they consider they have, because I think it is much more important to see, okay, you are attracted by this value, so your heart is connected to this. How can you put it in practice? How can you show them? Can you develop them? Because we are a single unit and your heart needs to be connected to the brain too, right?
Right.
So once they know their values, then we discuss about their objectives. And again, I always go to the 4 dimensions because I want them to see if there is one of them who might be less developed, because the main purpose is to be balanced in all areas of your life, because this is the best way to surpass any challenge that you will meet, because everybody has challenges to work with, right? So once we know the objectives that they have, we try to find the purpose. And this is kind of the first conversation that we have all together. Then in the second session, I discuss with them the results of 2 tests that I send them. So one is about what type of brain they have, because Dr. Amen has made a classification of 16 types of brain. So I send them the link to Dr. Amen website. They can do the test. They see what is the type of brain, and there are some advices that they can perform to help themselves based in more in the biological aspect. So mainly it's about nutrition and sleep and physical aspects. And then I also send them another assessment, which is about the brain areas, the prefrontal cortex, the cingulate gyrus, the basal ganglia, and the emotional brain. So once we have the results, we look at them, we discuss about them, we try to see, connected with the objectives and the purpose that they declared in the previous session, what can be done and what they have to focus on. And then in the 3 last sessions, we really tackle to the objectives that they declare to have within, let's say, midterm. So normally I ask them to focus on either 1 year or 18 months. And we look at what they can do based on their purpose, their objectives, and their brain type and how their brain areas work. And it is incredible how many things they discover about themselves, how they regain control of the things that they want to do, how they gain clarity about what they want to achieve in all the areas of their life. And they are much happier, if I may say, right? And to my surprise, because I really thought that 5 sessions was okay, but 80% of them, they always ask, okay, can we have another session in 3 months? It's just like to kind of reconnect with you and see if everything is okay and what do I need to redirect if I forgot some of the new habits that they have to take. Because the brain is very clever, and as he consumes up to 35% of all the energy that the body intakes, it is not enough for the brain. If the brain could have more energy, he would take it. So instead of having more, because the rest of the body is saying, no way, we keep the rest, what the brain does is to automatize a lot of aspects of our lives. We have thousands of thoughts during the day, but we don't think about them. We just perform. And many things should become to the awareness level again, so they can discuss and think about this is what I am doing really, and that this is beneficial for me or not, starting with the food, for example.
So you have people who come to you who may not physically have any issue like ADHD, but they feel there is something wrong, and you
Yes.
You help them by talking about the brain, and you help them look into themselves and learn about themselves, and hopefully become better as a result.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I have been doing so many years executive coaching, and I was missing something in my practice, and when I discovered this methodology, I was so happy, because for me, that was the missing point.
Yeah. So carrying that on, what kind of habits should people adopt or bring into their lives to be able to keep their brains functioning at peak capacity?
Now I think that everybody talks about the 3 main aspects about this. And this is, of course, nutrition, because this is the energy that gets into the body and makes it function, right? not only physically, but also mentally. Sleep is key, absolutely key, because, while we sleep, the brain is much more active than when we are awake, because it has to store all the memories that you have been creating during the day. And it's also washing itself and recovering the pieces that maybe are not going so well. And anyone can testify, if you do not sleep properly, when you wake up, you have like a cloud in your head and you are not able to think as you should. You cannot be as active or proactive as you would like. So nutrition, sleep, exercise, vanishing all the toxins that you can. Mold is super bad for the brain. And I think that people already know, when I look at Instagram, you have so many people, health coaches, life coaches, all doctors, physicians, functional doctors, everybody's talking about those three things. But I think that the main key thing that is needed is the will. Because you cannot change, you cannot improve if you don't want to. So hopefully people realize that something is not good or is not going as good as they wish or as they planned. And this is why they come to me or to other specialists or other coaches to see what they can improve. But there is no transformation if there is no will for that.
Yeah.
And there in the brain aspect, one thing that also helped a lot to my son was neurofeedback. I don't know if you have heard about it. It's they put some stuff in your head, and these are like electrical signs that keep the brain awake. So one of the things in ADHD is that some connections are lost, and the person looks at the screen, and the brain is monitored with a computer, and they see what are the connections that are not working, so they stimulate them. And we have been doing this for 2 years, and it helped a lot. And I know that this is not only used, neurofeedback is not only used for people having brain disorders, but also for people that are doing sports, and at work too. So it's helping in a lot of disciplines. And another thing that helped so much my son was sophrology. Have you heard about it?
No.
Okay, so sophrology is like a guided meditation.
Okay.
So the person that was taking care of my son first explored who he was, and then designed meditations specifically for him. And that was also amazing. It worked so well. For example, doing visualizations for the exams, because my son was terrified by doing exams, and he failed so many times, and he didn't know how to overcome this problem. And one of my sisters talked to me about a sophrologist, and I said, okay, let's try. We have been trying so many things, and that worked beautifully. I remember one of the most important exams he had to do before entering at the university was in a building 60 kilometers away from our house. And the sophrologist managed to make a visualization for him. And we went to the place. He could enter into the building, see the classes. So he got already a lot of information that was taking out anxiety from him, and he passed and he could go to university. I can tell you, he called me by telephone. I was at the office, and he called me. He said, "Mom, I have a future." That was for him like the big, big pain he could not overcome, and he did.
I assume there are people who face cognitive challenges at work, or they discover that they're starting to experience those. What are some early preventative measures, very quickly, if you will, that people can incorporate if they think that they're discovering cognitive issues at work?
Okay. I would say that the social environment is very important. Okay. Why do I say that? For example, an ADHD child that is living in the countryside, who can run and make a lot of physical movements and doesn't have to be seated quiet, he might go through ADHD in a much more healthy way, if I may say. So for adults, for example, when there is something that is not going properly, if the social environment that you have around is a supportive one, and they can make you aware of this is fantastic. Okay. It's all about first awareness, either by yourself, either by the people who loves you, and then communication. It's important to talk about it. If it is a biological problem, like any brain disorders, there will be the need from the work environment to adapt to it. And I think that many companies, as we were talking about before, are really conscious about it, and they are doing a lot of investments and effort to include these type of profiles.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because we're going to have to wrap this up soon anyway. If somebody feels they're having some cognitive issues developing and so on, what kind of message do you have for them? What message do you have for everyone, but especially those who may think that they're facing cognitive kinds of things?
I would always look for a functional doctor, meaning a person who does not look only to what you say that is happening to you, because many times there is some other sources, right? So young people, I have some students that I am taking care of, and some of them, they come and say, "Oh, I have such a headache." Yes, but maybe the headache is because you are not eating properly, or because you did not rest properly, or because, there are many other things that can happen. So for me, it is so important to go to somebody who has a holistic view of yourself, your habits, the way you live, what you do, and then probably they can direct this person to a specialist, but not decided that because you have this cognitive impairment during 1 week, that something is terribly wrong and that you have to take this specific medicine. I rather prefer to suggest the person to go to somebody who can have a general view of who you are, and then try to detect where you have to go.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I were to add to that, the most important thing that I think people should do and can do is to constantly be aware of themselves.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to, if you find that something is different than what you expect, doing something about it.
Yeah, this is what I said, awareness and communication.
Yeah.
My grandfather, who was French, he was a veterinarian. And I remember him telling us to all the grandsons and granddaughters, you have to observe yourself. You need to know yourself, observe yourself always. And yes, awareness.
It's the most important thing that we can do. And there's no excuse to say, I don't have time. Of
Oh,
course
no.
you do. Because you are still going to be ultimately your own, if you really work at it, your own best advocate of what's going on with you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's important that you really do deal with that and address it. And if it means going to see a doctor or someone else, then do that. Well, Flor, I want to thank you for being with us today and talking to us about brain health and your coaching world and what you do. If people want to reach out to you and learn more and maybe engage your services, how do they do that?
Well, they can go. I mean, the webpage is in Spanish, but they can write to me at info at braintitude with two T's.com.
Spell
And
braintitude then. BRAIN.
braintitude, yes, to double TETUDE.
Okay.
And I have sent you also the brain type test from Dr. Amen. If anyone wants to just enter into the
It'll be in the
website.
show notes, right?
Yes, and see it. Yes, of course.
Well, I hope people will reach out. It's an important topic. It is something that is absolutely worth everyone thinking about. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to help raise awareness about it. And I'm excited by the work of Dr. Amen and the work that will continue to come. And as you said, AI is going to make a big difference. AI has
Absolutely.
helped in so many ways and being used in a very powerful and positive way. So thank you for being here. And I want to thank all of you for listening. Love to hear your thoughts. Please shoot me an email. Send an email to Michael, H-I, M-I-C-H-A-E-L-H-I, at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to our podcast page, which is www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. Michael Hingson is spelled MICHAELHINGSON.com/podcast. Wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We really value your reviews and your input. So please do that. We would appreciate it a great deal. If you know anyone else who ought to be a guest, and Flora as well for you, if you know anyone who we ought to have on as a guest to talk about issues, please let us know. Feel free to provide an introduction. We will respond, and we love to hear from people, and we love to get people on who want to talk about issues that we all should hear about. So thank you all again for listening. And Flor, I want to once more thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you.